Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, the Bronx Economic Development Corporation is on a mission to help better the Bronx. Joining us later to tell us more about the BXEDC's amazing programs is the Interim President of the BXEDC and the Director of Small Business and Community Outreach. What are some ways BXEDC is helping out our community? Then a new literacy program for public schools is coming to NYC. The CEO of Teaching Matters shared with us how this new program can help NYC students. What is the new literacy program being pushed in New York City? After that, the artificial intelligence chatbot developed by OpenAI was released last November, and it's rapidly making an impact in classrooms across America. The editor of Future Perfect at Vox Media joins us to explain the pros and cons of chatbot. What is ChatGPT and how does it work? And finally, June is Pride Month, and NYC is booming with various events. The co-chair of NYC Pride joins me to tell us more about her organization and their upcoming events. What events are happening for Pride this month? So stay tuned, all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kibin Alleyne and today is Tuesday, June 13th. You are now watching Open, a live program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. The Bronx Economic Development Corporation is on a mission to better the Bronx. The BXEDC launched an environmental challenge awarding up to $1 million to a Bronx-based university for the development of a project that encourages sustainability. In addition to this challenge, the organization also makes the effort to address issues facing small Bronx businesses. Joining me to discuss these efforts is Interim President of the BXEDC, Rob Walsh, and the Director of Small Business and Community Outreach, Marshall Strawbridge. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So can we just talk about your organization just as a whole? Can you tell me a little bit more about the Bronx Economic Development Corporation?
Sure. Well, it's a nonprofit organization, and what we do is pretty simple. It's promoting growth, it's promoting community building, and creating opportunities in the Bronx, throughout the Bronx. Whether it's colleges and universities, small businesses, our cultural attractions, the Yankees. And what we do is look to get capital access in the hands of small businesses and large businesses looking to build in the Bronx.
Now, I mentioned the Bronx Green Action Challenge, which it sounds pretty cool, like just hearing it. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the challenge and what it's all about?
My favorite project, and Marshall was the one that led the effort, but I'm going to take credit for it. This was, on our colleges and university campuses, and we have 12 of them throughout the Bronx. A lot of people don't realize the strength and involvement and engagement of our colleges and universities. We have more than 50,000, college students. I think that the student bodies are far ahead of the faculty, if you will, and many residents in thinking about sustainability and climate control. So we had a grant from the New York Power Authority that gave us a lot of flexibility. And Marshall and I sat down around a conference room table one day and said, where would this have the most catalytic impact? And we thought about the work that was being done at a lot of colleges, universities to tackle the issue of climate change. So here's what we're doing. We're putting $1 million on the table, and we're saying to colleges and universities, very simple, what are you doing right now? What are you doing on solar? What are you doing on electric cars? What are you doing on reducing waste? And what more would you do if you were awarded $1 million? And you could imagine $1 million is getting a lot of attention.
Right.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, could you add just about, the importance of kind of like focusing on colleges and, the inspiration behind that?
Sure. So one of the things that we, that led us to focus on colleges was the fact that they are a critical part of the Bronx economy. There's over 50,000 college students in the Bronx. Our colleges and universities collectively are one of the largest employment sectors. So we really saw this as an opportunity to partner with institutions that have a strong foothold in the Bronx and encourage them to build connections with the community. So part of our evaluation for who will receive the money is how good of a job they do with partnering with community-based organizations around their campuses to drive this forward.
And I think that's an important point. And I think it's, when people think about jobs and they think about opportunities, they don't often think about higher education in the Bronx. And what we wanted to do is put a greater spotlight on some of the activity, but we also wanted to spark innovation and creativity. I was at an event last night where someone was saying they wanted to bring wind power to the Bronx. Could you imagine some of these colleges helping with that? Manhattan College right over the hill has an engineering school, of teaming up with companies like that want to invest in the Bronx and create good jobs. And I think that's what it's all about.
And I mean, I also really like the fact that there is a focus on universities and colleges in the Bronx, because I think when people think of the Bronx, they're not automatically thinking like there's so much talent and just greatness here in the borough. So I love that aspect of it. I also really you guys are doing so many things. I also want to touch on the fact that you recently issued an RFP for a storefront improvement project. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that project?
Well, I'll give you the beginning, and Marshall will give you the details of it. When you think about economic development and you think about our main streets, our main corridors, 149th Street, Fordham Road, and so many others, you think about the look of it and the quality of it. Is this an attractive place? Do I want to be here? And storefronts is that first impression. We had money from the state through a revitalization grant, and Marshall hit the ground running to develop a program with the state.
And I also want to talk about, how does the program address small business challenges that are happening right here in the Bronx? Sure.
So one thing I will note is that storefront improvement, the look and feel of a small business, is only one part of the challenges that small businesses are facing. But this is an area where we had the money to intervene and maybe make a difference here. So the RFP that we issued is for a community-based organization for us to partner with, because what we're really wanting to do is put together a cohort of businesses that make up a cohesive commercial corridor. And we're really going to lean on the expertise and the connections of the community-based organizations that we end up partnering with to help us with that. We're also going to be leaning on them to support with getting businesses to submit their applications. This is a very sweet deal for businesses, I think, and I can share a little bit more about that. But it's not an easy ask to apply and put together a proposal for review for us. So we're hoping to get support from community-based organizations within the revitalization area on that piece. But just to point towards how this benefits small businesses, we are looking to do 2 tiers of programs. One is for smaller investments of $10,000 to $15,000, maybe updating the point of sale systems or the front desk, and smaller projects. And then there's the $20,000 to $50,000 tier, which is for more comprehensive storefront transformations. This is different from a lot of the storefront improvement programs that have been done in the city, in that, one, it goes up to $50,000. And in most cases, the improvement programs will cover programs up to $20,000 to $25,000. And usually the best matching programs you'll see are 50% matches. We're matching 80% of the program costs and only asking for 20% from businesses. And we're also working with the Business Initiative Corporation to put together funding options for them to cover the 20% that they're on the hook for.
Now, who can actually apply, for this?
We're going to be working through community-based organizations. So the community-based organizations will be our conduit to many of the smaller mom and pop shops that make up a retail corridor. So anyone along those retail corridors, and we're going to be focusing on, the coffee shops, the restaurants, the shoe repair, folks. And as Marshall said, collectively, that'll make a heck of a difference along these retail corridors. And it's in a certain catchment area that is eligible.
It's south of 165th Street, down to 139th Street, between the Harlem River and St. Anne's Avenue.
So we've reached out to all the community-based organizations in that area.
And I want to know, like, what does this mean? Like, what will it look like for people walking by? Because I think if you're not in the business, you're probably like, you don't know what a storefront is, or you don't know what that entails. So, like, what would that?
That's a great great question. And and I have a little bit of experience. I was small business commissioner during the Bloomberg administration, and then after Hurricane Sandy, we had to rebuild a number of corridors. And I use the Rockaways as an example for the Bronx, if I can. And sometimes you don't notice that there was an enhancement and improvement, but you're saying, well, there's something attractive about this place. And there's something attractive when a store owner puts a little bit extra. And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's removing what I would say is clutter and having some straight lines and maybe blade signs. And if you're doing this in concert with other storefront owners, collectively, it has a greater impact.
Now, I want to talk about this before we, run out of time. The Community Advantage Loan Program.
Big one.
Can you talk about that and what that's all about?
Big one. This is an SBA, Small Business Administration, through the federal government. We are one of 3, I believe, in New York State that have this. And what it does, it's a federal-backed loan, which will allow us to reach those small businesses looking for $5,000 up to $350,000. That's a sweet spot. A lot of the larger banks, by the way, and smaller banks don't lend money to. They don't lend money because a lot of those are first-time entrepreneurs, and they don't have the credit. So this program allows us to lean in helping small businesses with capital access. The biggest issue, I believe, in the Bronx right now for businesses. And
can you expand on that a little bit more too?
Sure. One of the main benefits that'll be visible to small business owners is the flexibility that they'll have in how they're able to spend the money. So most of our lending programs now are not eligible to be used for regular operating expenses and certain procurement expenses. And so with Community Advantage Program, businesses will have a lot more flexibility in terms of how they can use this money for their day-to-day needs.
Now, these are so many things. It's very ambitious. And I love to hear that there's just like so much happening in the Bronx, and there's so much growth and development that's happening in the Bronx. What inspires you both to, it's a lot of work. What inspires you both to keep on doing it?
Well, I've been in this business a long time, and when you have an organization, and by the way, thank you on that compliment, I'll take it, is when you put people together around the table in the Bronx, the character, the diversity, the innovation, that commitment really comes out clear. Later on today, tomorrow, we're going down to Alexander Avenue, in Mott Haven, and looking at a couple of projects. We'll be up at Fordham Road, Arthur Avenue, wherever it is. Bringing people together is what inspires me to think big.
That's amazing. And then can you quickly just tell us what inspires you?
Sure. It's been clear to me since I came to the Bronx to go to Manhattan College in 2017 that the Bronx is a place that's transforming and really becoming a beautiful and vibrant economy. And I think that since my time there, and out of college, I worked for the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, and really have a passion for ensuring that the transformation that happens is one that benefits Bronxites. And so I think that what we're doing is certainly pursuant to that goal.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining us.
And thank you very much for helping us get the word out. Appreciate it.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper. I've been running code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
It's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
Analytics and empathy. That's how getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I am more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. Stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
My character, Shazam, knows all about growing up in a family full of teenage superheroes. They're bold.
Where's everyone going?
To fight crime?
Okay.
Adventurous. Shazam! There's never a dull moment. And no matter what happens, they'll always have your back. All they need is a place to grow and be themselves. And the best part is, you don't have to be a superhero to adopt a teen. Learn more about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back. A new literacy program for public schools is coming to NYC following the aftermath of remote schooling. The program comes in response to a major drop in reading scores during the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me to discuss the new program is the CEO of Teaching Matters, Lynette Guastaferro. Lynette, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, could you first just talk about your organization, Teaching Matters?
Sure. So Teaching Matters is a nonprofit education organization. It was founded with the mission that every child should have equitable access to really high quality teaching, no matter their zip code. So how we do this is we have a group of close to 80 coaches, mentors that work side by side with teachers, principals in schools, helping them to implement and affect their instruction. We measure our success based on movements in kids' math outcomes and their reading outcomes, and we have research to show that we have made that impact.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit more about the impact that you've had on New York City schools. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so over 30 years, we've worked in close to 1,000 of the New York City schools. So it's a long history, and we've had a direct impact on student outcomes, which I think is really important. Like, we want our kids to be able to be, numerate and literate, and that's really how we measure our work. The other piece that we have done, which I think has been really important after COVID, is teachers have been through a lot. And the mentoring, the support, I think has been a lifeline, especially since COVID. And I'm really proud of that.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think, for me at least, when I'm thinking about like your organization, I think like there's a focus on students, which is great. But I like to hear that there's a focus on teachers. Can you just expand on that a little bit more, and like the support that you give teachers?
Yeah. So when we're partnering with a school, we'll have a coach who is an expert in their own right and has moved, literacy outcomes for their students and has maybe led a group of literacy teachers in their own school. So when they come to a school, they are modeling for the teacher. They're observing the teacher, giving them feedback. They are having conversations where the teacher's saying, I don't know why this isn't working. And they're able to talk it through. So, I think teaching's really hard because it's so important. Your kids are so important to you, and you have a lot of self-doubt. Everybody does. And so when you have someone who is really able to help you process what's working and not working, it's a real emotional support to teachers, and it really keeps them in the profession. The research shows that this kind of coaching keeps teachers teaching longer, and that's what our Bronx kids need.
Now, I really want to talk about the new literacy program, or as I understand, is more of an initiative that's happening in New York City. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. NYC Reads, NYC Reads is frankly a historic change in the way that the city is making a promise to families that the decision around the curriculum that your kids will be engaged in is now being made at the superintendent and the central level. So the mayor is able to say, I guarantee you a research-based curriculum. In the past, the decision's been at the school level, and it's been like that for a long time. Now, why does this matter to families? I think it's really important because when you have a district where every teacher and every principal is working around a common playbook, there's all these other things that you can now do, right? So you can provide professional learning that's really aligned. Everybody's on the same page. Teachers across schools can observe what's working, and then they go back to their own school and it's the exact same curriculum, so they can really transfer what they've learned. You can start to look at assessments differently and make sure the assessments really measure what the kids learned in the classroom. And so it's really transformative. People have talked about this as, we're going to have phonics now. And I was like, well, frankly, phonics has been in place for in many, many schools. I think it's more important than that. And I think phonics is really important, don't get me wrong. But I think it's about changing the infrastructure for the city so that we can guarantee every family a research-based curriculum. You don't have to worry anymore. You will know that it's been approved.
Now, I understand that there's 3 models, and you can correct me on that.
Yeah.
There's 3 models. Can you just explain like what they are and like what the kids could be learning?
So there's 3 choices of curricula right now that the districts are allowed to use for K-5, and that's just the first start. And in fact, I think there's a choice of 2 different phonics programs as well. The different curricula, I really like to say, like, what's similar about the curricula? They've all met a certain standard. They all provide kind of a research-based approach to reading. And there's some differences, but I think what's more important here is that every teacher in the district's going to be using the same curricula. So, we say curriculum does not, what really makes a difference for kids is a group of teachers that are really working together and rowing the boat, together. And so when you have a common curricula, that makes that more possible. Having a common curriculum on its own is not a solution. It's about the teachers, and it's about how the teachers collaborate and work together that really, really makes a difference for schools.
Now, I want to talk about basically how this is a response to the drop in reading scores following COVID.
Yeah.
Now, I know like when remote schooling was happening, a lot of people had these concerns. Could you just talk about what you've noticed and just expand on, how reading scores were back then and then, what we saw during COVID?
So, nationally, McKinsey's done some research to show that across the board, kids have lost about a half a year of reading. But we know that loss, that's an average. And so, for younger children, it's particularly difficult. For lower socioeconomic communities, they were hit much harder. Kids whose parents were essential workers and weren't sitting, at home, working from home. But so there's all sorts of reasons why that half a year is spread out pretty differently. I think that what the mayor is doing is to address to some degree like this situation we're in, especially for younger children, around ensuring that they can read. But I think without COVID, this was something that we needed to do.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit more, just focus on like the actual like reading part, but it's not just reading, it's also like the pronunciation of words, I guess like how they understand. Can you just explain like why that's so important?
Yeah, so one of the things that we sort of for a number of years was not practiced effectively across schools was this understanding that children need a systematic approach to phonics. Now, I'm old, so I had that. And in fact, I went to kindergarten in the Bronx and was struggling to read and went through a year of phonics intensive. So we were doing it, right? We just, for some reason, the education field moved away. I think there was a sense that kids were not stimulated by it. It was like not engaging. We wanted to move to a love of reading. We definitely want kids to love reading, but we, from brain science know that kids have to systematically understand the code. Like phonics is a code. And kids have to know how to master that so that they can read for understanding. And by the way, it's true, not every child needs phonics. It's around 1 in 3 that really, really need it. And I was one of them. I couldn't read a thing until I went through phonics. And then all of a sudden the world opened up and I could write 2-page papers. So like, it really is just a code. It's not a sign of intelligence. It's a code. And some kids need the code more than others.
Now, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. You also kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, that children from maybe lower income areas struggle a little bit more. Black and Latino students tend to struggle a little bit more as well. Can you just explain, why we're seeing that and like what could be the reasons for that?
Well, I mean, we know that we have a long history of sort of systemic oppression in our education system that we don't have enough time on this show to cover. And that's still going on. I mean, we still have a system of schools that are funded by property taxes, which means that, the wealthier communities you live in, the more funding your schools get. So we don't have an equal education system. And to this day, we have major differences in our schools because of how the school system is funded. It's a travesty. It's wrong, and it really needs to be changed. So I think that's an important sort of history that you have to take in context with that. With respect to, students are also coming in, they speak a second language. The research shows that actually many of those children catch up and start beating the rest of the kids from a test score perspective. So, I don't consider that to be, that's a language issue where kids are sort of having to get the language before they can, they can get to the next level.
Now we have a few minutes left, and I really want to touch on what Mayor Adams said. His administration believes that if you don't educate, you incarcerate, and says that the current literacy program leaves too many kids behind. What have you seen in your experience, and is this something that you necessarily agree with or maybe possibly find not to be the case?
I really appreciate the mayor and his breadth of experience and his just breaking it down the way he has. Yes, if kids can't read, there is a correlation to what. So in the jail system, research shows that 70% of folks who are incarcerated are reading at 4th grade and below reading level. So you do the math. He's talking about sort of let's handle the problems upstream so that we don't have to deal with these issues downstream. If we could make sure that all of our kids were reading at a high level, their whole trajectory of school and lifetime outcomes change. And yes, some of those outliers can show that it can increase, it can cause kids to have life situations that lead to incarceration. So I love the fact that the mayor was he's focused on education. He's worked in policing, and he's taking a practical approach and taking a long view on this.
Now, quickly, can you just let us know what you hope to see? I guess since the mayor is looking at what could happen in the future, what do you hope to see of the future of reading and education in New York City?
So what I really hope to see in the next 5 years is that everyone in this ecosystem, whether you're nonprofits helping educators, whether you're the union that has, a whole bunch of ways to support teachers, the teachers themselves, the teacher leaders, they were all talking the same language, and we're able to learn from each other, and we're able to really figure out how to get better and better and better over time. So first thing we have to learn these new curricula, but then it's how do we continuously improve? These curriculum are not going to work for every student. Teachers have a lot of work to do on top of this to make sure it works for every child. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to get better and better at figuring that out over time. So I am excited to be on a common playing field where we can work together with a similar playbook and really work together for the first time in many, many years.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing this information.
Thank you so much for having me.
To stay in touch with Teaching Matters, you can go to www.teachingmatters.org or follow them on social media at Teaching Matters. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
¿Qué color? Perfecto, mijo.
Gracias. Thank you.
What's wrong, mijo?
Donating to a pet's medical care is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Even though we didn't grow up together, he's my favorite brother.
Hey, sis.
I'm the baby of the family, and he's the gentle giant.
What you know about Poor Georgia?
Man, please, that's a classic.
You know when they say people are a rare breed? Yeah, he's that.
I'm sorry, I'll be back in a few hours.
Don't worry, Shug, you know I'm for you.
I know.
Go get the football.
That was my favorite memory. He was always for you. This is a true story of me Bridget Floyd, and this guy, George Perry Floyd Jr., my big brother.
Dear moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
You know it's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
Welcome back. Artificial intelligence is slowly but surely affecting almost every aspect of everyday life, from healthcare to education. One of the most notable uses of AI is with ChatGPT. The artificial intelligence chatbot developed by OpenAI was released last November, and it's rapidly making an impact in classrooms across America. Joining me to discuss the future of this technology and its effect on education is the editor of Future Perfect at Vox Media, Bryan Walsh. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be here.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about Vox's Future Perfect section and some of the themes that it explores?
Sure. Well, as the name suggests, we cover the future, and that means we look at really big, important emerging technologies, things like artificial intelligence, biotechnology. We kind of ask, what can we do? What can these technologies do to make the future a better place? But also, how do we avoid really bad things from happening? Because what's really interesting about with a ChatGPT or other kind of things we cover is that kind of go either way. It could make things a lot better, but it also comes with a lot of risks as well.
I think that's the most interesting part of talking about technology in the future is sometimes it has this really dark undertone where it could be dystopian, but then sometimes it could be, really, really great. And there's so many things that could arise from that. Now, saying that, I want to talk about ChatGPT. Can you explain what that is and how does it work?
Sure. It's a large language model, which means basically it's an algorithm or computer program that's been trained on just a gargantuan amount of text, like billions and billions and billions of words. And what it's able to do through deep neural nets that honestly I could not really explain to you, is it can sort of predict what words follow what words. It's trained in that way. And what that means is that you can speak to it essentially as you might a human being. It can kind of understand what you're saying, or at least understand in that kind of predictive way, and then write its own responses. And you can kind of direct it in any number of directions. It has a really deep base of information. So it's been very interesting to see how it's been actually used in education in the classroom, because it really can kind of write, it seems like, and it kind of read as well.
Now, I wanted to go into that. What is it typically used for?
Well, it's used for a lot of things. I mean, right now you're seeing it used for fun. You're seeing it used to create chatbots that you can speak to it for medical information, or you can do it for education, for instance. It's going to go into businesses. It can be used for customer service. I mean, there's really no shortage of uses for that. And we're just figuring this out as we go along. And it doesn't come with an instruction manual. We're kind of figuring out as we speak to it, as we use it.
Now, I like that you say that. It's because we have to learn, how to use this. And I think a lot of students are learning very quickly how they can use this stuff. Can you just talk about how teachers are incorporating this into their classrooms?
It kind of goes two ways. I mean, one way is that they're not incorporating the classroom because they can see this as something that can instantly produce decent or sometimes quite good essays, the kind of things you would be assigned in high school or in college on just about any topic. You give it a sentence prompt, which means just what you enter into the chatbot window on, say, I want to make a 1,000-word essay on, the history of neurology. And it will do that, and it will look perfectly good. So obviously that's a little dangerous because it sounds like you could just get a shortcut that way. But a lot of teachers are also using it to kind of improve education, to personalize it, to speed process of giving grading or giving feedback to students. So, which way it's going to go is going to depend on what schools think, what teachers think about it, how they adapt to it. And we're kind of writing those rules right now.
Now, you mentioned shortcut, and I think that's very interesting. I feel like throughout history, we've had so many advances in technology. And I don't know if I've ever heard the term shortcut used before. I don't know if people thought calculators were a shortcut or, just using a computer was a shortcut. But can you just talk about why some people are kind of viewing it this way?
Well, we actually have viewed those kind of technologies in that way before. I mean, I'm old enough that I learned times tables, 5 times 5 is 25 and so forth. Of course, calculators kind of took over all that. As they got more complicated, they could handle bigger and bigger equations. And people did have a real concern about that. Wait, are you supposed to learn math by doing it in your head? And then we understood that eventually, you can use these calculators and other technologies ditto with like laptop computers, Google for that matter, to process information better, and you can still be learning. So I think at this stage, we're figuring that out with ChatGPT. The difference is, we do some math, we do other things, but writing and speaking, that's like basic to being a student, basic to being a human being. So if something can come in and do that, it's hard to not see it as a shortcut. At the same time, it's going to be embedded in how people go out in the workforce. It becomes something they actually have to learn, and that might be part of it as well.
Now, some fear that this technology could be used to replace teachers. First, I just want to get your thoughts on just like the idea that, AI could be replacing a teacher.
There's so much anxiety about this with AI across the board. I mean, I'm someone who writes and edits writing for a living, and here's something that can just instantly write and edit. So it's a little worrying for that way. And yeah, I can understand that. I think what's more likely with teachers, given all the other things they do beyond this particular task, it can help them. It can probably accelerate their ability to handle more students, to get rid of a lot of the paperwork, busy work. I mean, that's a real area where just imagine like being able to get like report cards or just all the kind of stuff you have to do as a teacher. And then you can spend more time on teaching. But that said, like, I think we will see a lot of concerns about this. We'll see a lot of disruption. But at the end of the day, like a teacher does things that no AI can do, no matter how sophisticated it becomes.
Right. And, you talked about other professions that may be afraid of like, oh no, like this thing could come in.
Mm-hmm.
I saw someone say like, oh, the writers strike, like, oh, just get the AI to like make a script for you. And I think there's something missing from a computer that, a human adds. Like, for example, like a teacher, there's certain things like the understanding or the compassion that an AI doesn't have. Can you just talk about maybe what you think about that in regards to just like what humans can offer that like AI can't?
I mean, I think they can offer, the ability to actually be in a place for one thing, but yeah, they can offer a creativity. They have a much deeper level of knowledge. And that's one of the weird things about these bots is that they both know a lot of things, but they also know nothing. They just know what predicts one thing. And that can only get you so far, I think. So when it comes to actually teaching, like being a mentor, no, an AI can't really do that. Can it be an assistant kind of? Can it help the teacher? Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think that will actually be an improvement, but we're going to really have to help teachers in classrooms figure out how we integrate this in the best possible way.
Now, how does ChatGPT compare to ways we've used technology in the past?
I think this is like a big leap forward. For one thing, this is just way more sophisticated than any kind of similar chatbot we've had in the past. I mean, we just, until last year, essentially, no one was really concerned about this being used in this kind of way. So it's just a leap forward. And again, I think it's because writing is so key to everything we do. I mean, students are writing all the time. We expect them to do that. We test it on them. And so the ability to do that, that's a big change. But, we've adjusted to other technological leaps beforehand with a lot of disruption, with a lot of pain sometimes in the short term. But I think on the other hand, we end up sort of becoming a little more capable, a little more widely experienced. And again, if you're going to use this in the future in the workplace, it helps actually understand it in the classroom as well.
Now, can you talk about maybe some cons of software like ChatGPT? I can say from my own experience growing up with calculators, I don't know if I would choose that now just because, math is not my best subject. And I like also people talk about like autocorrect and like how it's made them get a little bit lazy when it comes to like writing. So can you just talk a little bit, maybe some things that you noticed in your own experience and what could the cons be of like relying on something like this?
Well, the biggest con is that these models sometimes make things up. We call it hallucination. They just sort of invent facts. So that's a problem. If you're depending on it to be 100% sure and you don't know the subject yourself, you're going to get in trouble and people will notice that really quickly. And we haven't figured out how to change that really. So that's one thing. I think beyond that, you point out like with math, like how important is it to know how to write from the blank page on? Like I do worry a little bit that if this is how you learn to write, you're going to be missing something. That there's some process that takes place in your brain when you're actually writing that you won't be able to do if you're using this bot. That said, I don't know. I mean, maybe in the future I have a 5-year-old son. Actually, he's almost 6. He'll be upset if he hears me say that. If he learns to write this way, like, will he be different? Or will he just be ready for a very different kind of future than I was when I was a kid?
Now, I'm glad that you brought that up. And thank you for sharing that because I didn't think about how this could be affecting like younger audiences. I automatically just assumed that it's usually high schoolers and maybe college students. But, what could be, the outcome of introducing this to children who are maybe just learning how to read and write?
I don't think we really know, actually. Like it's hard to learn to write. Like I see, again, my son, like he's starting, it's slow, it's a painful process. If there's a way to get around that and like you're just doing it as a native person with this technology, will you want to go it the hard way? That said, like, it's an experiment basically. So we don't really know. I think we'll have to look. And I do think it's important to learn to write. Like as a writer, I really do. But that's not easy for everyone. And so maybe in the same way that like this calculator help with math could do other things, this might be the same case with a lot of writing, but I think this will be a really important role in learning how to write as well.
Now, when is it appropriate to use ChatGPT ChatGPT? And then when does it become cheating?
That's a fascinating question. I think it really depends on what the teacher says to a certain extent. Like some classrooms have banned this. So if you're doing that, I guess that's technically you're cheating. But I think there's also the question, like, are you cheating the system or are you cheating yourself? Like if the point of education is to improve yourself, to learn things, if your use of ChatGPT is allowing you to like bypass that, then yeah, that's cheating. It might not be technically cheating, but you're cheating yourself. So I think that's kind of how we define it. And that's why we really do need, okay, really clear guidelines in the classroom. How should these be used? Experimentation. And then if something goes wrong, we should change that and say, okay, we need to use this in a different way. That's really the key part to me.
Now, a lot of young school-age children, high schoolers are using this. And I'll see online or social media all the time. They're like talking to it. Sometimes they're putting in your personal information if you're writing a personal essay. Is this technology safe to use? Does it store information? Or is that something that people should kind of be cautious or wary of? I think we should definitely be cautious about that. Like, we're not really clear on what happens with the information that feeds into ChatGPT. It's not like personalizing you like advertising is. But, if you're talking about personal things, that's a danger in the same way that kind of would be on anything online. So I'd be a little worried about that. And that's another area where, I hope the government at some point comes in and says, okay, we need specific rules about privacy, about other things that have to do with AI. Because right now it's kind of a bit of a wild west in terms of those kind of things. And what can be done to ensure that students aren't abusing this technology, especially in regard to education? I think the key thing here is for teachers to understand it themselves. So if the teachers are behind the students on this and the students are racing ahead, that does create a risk, I think. So helping them understand it. And then I think, figuring out rules, figuring out sort of experimentation with the best kind of ways to use it. That's, I think, the best way, like, we can assure that students are getting the most out of it, they're not getting cheated themselves, and that, education remains education, because this is going to change a lot. People talking about like it's going to end the essay, things like that. We'll need to figure out new ways to assess students, know what they're learning, and we just have to be aware of that. Now, you wrote a book, End Time, so that's why I love that you said like end, the idea of the essay. Can you just talk about, your book and how you explore themes of advanced technology? Yeah, so End Times is about all the different ways the world could end, both natural ones like a big asteroid coming out of the sky and destroying us all like the dinosaurs, or more so really like new technologies. So like say like synthetic biology, you can create really dangerous germs in the lab, or with AI, there's a lot of worry, including by some of the same people making the AI, somewhat ironically, that as this becomes more and more intelligent, it could kind of decide to get rid of us, something Skynet, Terminator-esque. So, I do worry about that a little bit. I worry about other ends of the world a bit more, but I think it just shows like how big these changes are going to be and how we do with them, how we deal with them. That's going to be enormously important for the future we have, assuming we have a future with this. Right. And, I think it's so funny. This isn't the first time that we've explored this. There's so many shows like Black Mirror where they talk about how technology could like kind of be dark. So I truly appreciate you just talking, with me about this and just the future of education. I know that technology has impacted the way that I learned. And I think about like if I went to college in the 90s, like, would I be able to make it? Because, it's really different. Yeah. It's very different. So I truly appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about this. It was really interesting. Thank you very much. It was great to be here. To keep up with all of Vox Media stories, please go to their website at www.vox.com. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back when they're open right after this.
We all know what it's like to feel alone. But it just takes one new connection. Want to get out of here? To empower many.
This is unbelievable.
It doesn't take a superhero to bring forces together. We all have the power to reach out.
Let's go!
And help someone feel like they belong.
Pretty cool, huh?
We are stronger together.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. The month of June is dedicated to celebrating members of the LGBTQ+ community. NYC Pride is one of several organizations using their platform to uplift these marginalized communities and work towards a future without discrimination. Joining me to discuss their efforts is co-chair of NYC Pride, Sue Doster. Sue, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, can you just talk about, heritage of Pride and, what that's all about?
Absolutely. Heritage of Pride is the organization that produces New York City Pride. We were formed in the mid-'80s, and we've been doing it ever since. We took over from an older group called Christopher Street Liberation Day Committee. Sisseldick, it's a mouthful. But we are Heritage of Pride. We go by HOP. We go by New York City Pride. All the same.
Now, you just mentioned that it was, stemmed all the way back to the 80s. And I just think that's it's so amazing to see an organization, especially one like this, kind of just really stick around and kind of be a support system for people in New York City. Can you just talk about, how it feels to be a part of something that lasts so long and is something that people can rely on?
Absolutely. I myself have been involved for almost 3 decades now. I started in 1990, I guess more than 3 decades. And Pride has changed. Like we as a community has changed. Pride as an organization and as events have also changed. We tend to be a reflection of the values and goals of the community we serve. We are stewards of Pride. So way back, 30 years ago, Pride was very much a protest. Society was different. Stigma was way worse than it is now. And to just march down the street publicly sometimes took huge amounts of courage to do that. And now we have progressed. We still have a ways to go, but we have progressed, and the more celebratory aspects come out as well. But Pride was born of protest, and at our core, we continue to be a protest.
And I like that there's the distinction between a protest and celebration. I think that a lot of the times with marginalized communities, people feel like you always have to educate, which education is very important, but sometimes to just be and express joy and happiness is also it's almost in a way a sort of protest. So I'm so glad that you kind of brought that up and kind of made that visible to people. Now, events are a huge part of your organization. Can you just tell us a little bit more about them and why they're so special?
We have 8 amazing events this year for Pride. We try to have something for everything. We have Youth Pride for queer teens. We have the brunch, which celebrates Black chefs, Black small business owners. It happens right around Juneteenth. We have, Bliss, our women's dance, which celebrates women. We have Pride Island, our dance, which is primarily for men, but everyone is welcome, ends in fireworks. And of course, the march and the rally, we have a lot of amazing events.
Now, I really want to talk about the brunch that's happening on June 18th. Now, I think it's pretty amazing, and this is a part of another question that I'm going to ask eventually, but can you talk a little bit more about the brunch and how it honors Juneteenth and Pride together?
Absolutely. It used to be, when it was started, just a brunch, kind of cocktail brunch. But last year, it actually fell on Juneteenth. And with the current political climate and what was going on, we felt as an organization, we needed to do something to highlight the Black community in a positive way, because there are amazing Black chefs, Black small business owners, people working every day serving the community, but they may not have access to the same kind of resources that other businesses have. So because we see our view at our role as elevating more marginalized people and shining a spotlight on people who may not be able to find the spotlight on their own, we decided to keep the brunch as a celebration of Juneteenth. It will be going forward, and the event has been so well received by the community. It's absolutely heartwarming.
Now, what I love is that there's an effort to acknowledge intersectionality between race, gender, and just any, thing that you identify as. And I think that's so important for people who, live their life as minorities in any way, because I think that sometimes you're forced to choose, like, oh, which side do I feel oppressed? Which side do I have to choose? And I think it's so important that there's just a spotlight on, like, okay, no, you can be all of these things, and that your organization is choosing to acknowledge them. Can you just explain why that was so important?
One of our core values as an organization is inclusivity and diversity. There are a lot of organizations that say those words, and they're nice talking points, but we really try to live it. Our staff is diverse, and racially diverse, gender diverse, age diverse, geographically diverse. We have a staff member who's worked with us for years who lives in New Orleans. So, having those different points of view at the table allow us to, when we turn to the community, be more inclusive and invite people in, because people want to see reflections of themselves in leadership. So we make sure that we have the people running the show also diverse and embracing diversity.
And I can imagine that it just makes, like, people feel a little bit more comfortable. They're already vulnerable, just because of like what's happening in society. So to see that there are like different, people of different backgrounds there, I can imagine that only makes things a little bit more comforting. Now, I want to talk about Youth Pride. Can you just tell us what that is, and the mission of that?
I love Youth Pride. It's one of my favorite events. So often, a lot of LGBTQ culture happens around bars, and you have to be 21 to go in, and all the dance parties are 21 plus, completely leaving out queer teens. And so we created an event that really gave teens a place to come. We have DJs, we have amazing vendor activations. We have, trans kids can go and get a full makeover, and they can picnic and just really relax in their own space. This is the future of the movement. Let's welcome them in now.
Right. And I want to talk about this because I think it's so important. As we all know, or as many of us know, that, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding LGBTQ communities and the youth. Can you just explain why was it important for your organization to recognize that there could be a safe space, which I think is so important for young members of this community?
Well, unfortunately, I think some of the people working against our goals as a community find it a lot easier to attack youth who are in less of a position to stand up for themselves or fight back. It's really a classic playground bully story. And because of that, it is incumbent on all of us, every single LGBTQIA plus person, to stand up for every member of our community. Otherwise, our enemies will pick us apart one by one. We shouldn't be fighting each other. We should be standing together and standing against tyranny. Our theme this year is Strength Through Solidarity. And that is really what it's all about. And join us in solidarity.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is it the theme just like for the organization as a whole, or is that something that we'll see throughout the event?
Every year we have a theme. And this year we picked it. We pick it in the fall with input from our members, from our community. If anyone has a great idea for a theme, come to our website, in the fall, put it in. And we selected this theme even before all these hate attacks on our community. And since they've come up, the theme has become even more salient. We need to stand together.
Now, one of your major missions is working towards a future without discrimination. Can you just explain,
Yes.
why that's so important, and why is it something that we're still struggling even with today?
That is a good question. I like to think that we're moving in the right direction. And I think why we're seeing these attacks spring up is because these people realize that they are slowly losing. So they're panicking and they're lashing out. But we just got to keep moving it. It's, the arc of justice. We all have a hand on the arc, bending it towards justice. It's got to be all of us.
Now, I want to also touch on the fact that a lot of people often assume that members from this community have the same experience and, have the same life experiences. What can, people outside of the community do to be better allies? But also, what can people within the community do to be better allies?
That is a great question. And some of it starts with a simple gesture. Ask and honor someone what their pronouns are. Ask them, try to stick with them. We're all human, we make mistakes, but with practice, it becomes easier. That's the small gesture. That's the micro gesture. Going out, when you are working in a group, get involved in nonprofits and learn that not everyone comes to life from your point of view. There are cultural differences. There are socioeconomic differences, obviously race and gender. The more we can develop our own sense of empathy and compassion with the people we work with, the easier the trip will be, the journey will be for all of us.
Well, I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and informing me about this. So thank you so much.
Certainly, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
To find out more about NYC Pride Brunch on June 18th and all of their other events, please go to their website at www.nycpride.org or follow them on social media at NYC Pride. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.